Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity.
And also by the Pelvic Health Professionals membership. This is where pelvic health professionals connect and learn together. And great news, connected yoga teachers, our doors are open until June the 26th. We have extended doors open because of everything that's going on in the world. If you're listening in real time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you are listening somewhere far in the future, we are going to get into what's going on in this time as I'm recording this episode. And also in this episode, I get into why it is that we paused everything with pelvic health professionals. Hello and welcome if you're new here. This is the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I'm a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and a trainer and consultant who works for yoga teachers. This podcast was created for you so that you can connect to information and inspiration every single week and feel supported as you navigate being a yoga teacher and also an entrepreneur. In today's episode, I'm sharing the full interview that I did for the Live Like You Love Yourself podcast. This podcast is hosted by Maria, Kirsten, and Chara Caruthers. Chara and Maria both live in Australia now. They moved there from the US. Maria is a yoga therapist and an occupational therapist that specializes in healthy aging, chronic pain management, and proactive management of mental health using yoga. Chara is a yoga therapist and a registered Ayurvedic practitioner. She wrote a book all about how to live and eat according to Ayurveda. It's called Eat Like You Love Yourself. Maria and Chara initially scheduled this interview to talk about pelvic health. But with everything that was unfolding at the time, our conversation ended up taking a very different course. I have to admit, connected yoga teachers, I was really reluctant to even go forward with this interview, but I also wanted to hear from Chara and Maria and ask them a lot of questions. And so that's what you're going to hear. And I was so excited when Maria and Chara gave their full permission to share the entire interview with you. This was a really open and vulnerable conversation about the connection between yoga and politics and social justice, as well as the challenge of knowing how to support our communities, our yoga students of color, but also all communities through these very challenging times. I know I hear from yoga teachers all the time that they don't want to talk about the news or politics. And you're going to hear something that you don't often hear on the podcast. I keep my thoughts around politics pretty quiet because I've found that yoga teachers don't always want to hear that, but you're going to get to hear how things work in our household around politics. I really think that these issues are important for us to be looking at right now as a yoga teacher and also as an entrepreneur. I recently attended a training with Trudy LeBron. Shout out to Trudy because it was an amazing training. And in that, she was talking about how it is our job as business owners to follow the news, to know what's happening in the world. Because if we don't, we can't adjust our messaging and our marketing. And we just saw that happen right now. This is why pelvic health professionals went on hold for a little bit. It would have been very disrespectful to not know what was going on in the world and just throw our stuff out there. On that note, on that thread, connected yoga teachers, if you're cringing a little bit here thinking that you don't want to watch the news, I completely get that. I listen to 2 news podcasts every single morning. Well, one of them only happens Monday to Friday. And that gets me kind of all of the world news from the perspective of a US podcast and also a Canadian news podcast. So I listen to CBC. That's our Canadian broadcasting, The World This Hour. They update it every single hour. I just listen first thing in the morning to that one. And then I also listen to The Newsworthy with Erica Mandy. That's a non-biased US podcast. And I feel like between those 2 podcasts, I get all of the highlights that I need to know about. I'll make sure that the links to those are in the show notes, along with any other links from today's podcast. If you're looking for those show notes, it's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/173. I also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Schedulicity. I am so amazed at how Schedulicity continues to show up for our small business owners, particularly yoga teachers. Schedulicity has just extended the pause on all payments until August because they were hearing from the small business owners that times are still tough and they still need help. And Schedulicity stepped forward. And if you heard last week's episode, Schedulicity gave me an update that while they pause everything, they are not being paid. So this is a company that's really investing in small business owners, helping them out. So let's hear our hot tip of the week from the team over at Schedulicity.
Hey there, connected yoga teachers. This is Mickey with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Human beings are not machines. We can only endure so much before we need a break. Yoga teachers treat both the physical and mental well-being of their clients, and that can sometimes take its own mental and emotional toll. When you need a break, Schedulicity makes it easy to create a block of personal time. Carve out a little bit of time for yourself and rest assured that it will be protected in your schedule. Online clients will not know that you're taking a break. They'll only see the times that you are available, so you can practice self-care and avoid burnout.
Thank you so much, Team Schedulicity. If any of you are already using the online booking software of Schedulicity, I'd say make a post on social media and thank them for pausing the payments. Tell them how much they are supporting you right now. I also want to give a shout out of thanks to Jennifer Sanders, who gave me permission to share this testimonial. Jennifer recently joined Pelvic Health Professionals, and she said, "I'm a new member of this group and just want to say, wow. Shannon and team have done a fabulous job with everything. If you are passionate about pelvic health, like I am, this is a no-brainer. Also, at this time, when a lot of us have felt isolated, it's been wonderful to join this community." Thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much, Jennifer. These are two of my favorite things, pelvic health and talking all about pelvic health and community and really connecting with other people. If you're wondering how to join Pelvic Health Professionals, you can go to pelvichealthprofessionals.com. So let's dig right in and hear from Chara and Maria over at the Live Like You Love Yourself podcast.
We are moving through unprecedented times right now, folks. And what that means is, you guessed it, discomfort. Hey there, it's Chara Caruthers here, and it's been a very uncomfortable week for people all around the globe. Our beliefs are being challenged, our politics are being challenged, and the very foundations on which we know ourselves and make our choices are being shaken. In my mind, this is a good thing. Yeah, it's a scary thing, but one that I would argue yoga actually prepares us for. The ability to be with uncertainty, the impulse to inquire within, the willingness to hold space for those around us. These are the gifts of our yoga practice. And they're also the generous and unique talents of our guests today. You know, when we originally booked Shannon Crow for the show, we'd planned to focus on pelvic floor health, which is only just one of her areas of expertise. Shannon, she's a consultant and a mentor to yoga teachers, and she's the host of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast and community on Facebook. And it's a growing community of yoga teachers from all around the globe. It's a welcoming space to ask questions and to share your wins and your fears and resources, and more than anything, to be supported. I've been a member of the group for a while, and I can feel the work that Shannon and her team have done to make it a welcoming and supportive community for talking about all sorts of things related to yoga. And we talk a little bit about that in our podcast today. And so recently I reached out to Shannon and I asked if it would be okay to post a question or a discussion starter around the subject of the connection between yoga and politics. And in the past, you know, we talk about this too. Politics have been kept out of the group, in part because of how incendiary they can be these days, but also because of an unclear connection between yoga and politics. But Shannon was immediately open-hearted and intrigued by the question herself. And so she ended up putting her full support behind the post, which ended up opening up a really interesting and engaged conversation in the group. And so Shannon and I, we got to talking, and we decided that we would have her on the podcast to share pelvic floor insights and the details of her upcoming online course. And then the protests kicked off and basically took over the US and the world and the hearts and minds of so many of us. And so in the end, we decided to move with that energy and and you'll hear that too at the beginning of our conversation, because we made that decision basically, once we were already talking to her, once we turned, the microphones weren't on yet, but so we just decided to move with that and to focus our conversation around understanding the connections between yoga and politics and the challenges for yogis of color and their white colleagues who are right now just trying to figure out how to best acknowledge and support them. We talk about the challenges for folks of all colors in learning to speak each other's languages in a way that truly honors the history and the circumstances and the beauty in all of us. I got to tell you, this conversation was such a joy. Shannon is one of the most open-hearted and real people I know. And in our conversation, she shares her real fears and vulnerabilities in a way that will make you love her as much as we do. So please, please enjoy this conversation with Maria, me, and Shannon Crow. Okay. I don't usually take that deep of a breath before starting. We are here with Shannon Crow. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in once again. It's Chara, Maria, and our lovely guest, Shannon Crow. I would have talked in the intro about Shannon, so you will know all about her. And Maria and I are just super excited because Shannon has got a lot of interests and a lot of things that she's doing. And so that means that there's quite a bit for us to talk about. But we thought, kind of given where we are, the date that we are recording this is the 2nd of June. We thought that given where we are, that we would kind of dive in and talk a little bit about community. And that's lucky because Shannon has created a community of yoga teachers. And so I kind of wanted to get a little bit of background from Shannon about where that all came from and where did it all come? Where did it all come from? How did you decide to create this community for yoga teachers? We'll kick off there, and we've got lots of places we can go.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I panicked for a moment thinking it's June the 2nd, but then I realized, it's June the 1st here in Canada.
You're like, wait, I lost a day somewhere in there.
I'm super excited to be here because I've been listening to your podcast and I feel like it's a really comforting place to hang out. Like I said before we started recording, it feels like I'm kind of hanging out with friends and having tea. And there are some great conversations happening here. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
In terms of where did the community start? So I think from kind of a place of maybe like pain and discomfort, like leaving 200-hour yoga teacher training was the first shock. So it was a year of yoga teacher training. And at graduation, the 30 of us all said, we're going to get together every single month because we had been for a whole year. And then we never got together again because it's a 3-hour drive for me and lots of other people. Like life goes on. And so it was kind of like we were in this bubble of meditation and everyone was studying together, and all month we had homework, like 40-day meditations and all kinds of things, a lot of inner work. And then boom, we're out in the world. And so I think that's what started feeling like I'm in community, but then I'm out. And then maybe the only way to get back in community is to take another yoga teacher training. And so time and money got eaten up pretty quickly. I mean, I did go to lots of teacher trainings, but I started to also feel like there were different things that were upsetting to me, like seeing a yoga culture become like you're in if you're this, or you're out if you're not. And so I wanted there to be this collective place where we could all gather and ask questions that feel uncomfortable to ask and have discussions. And so the podcast was born out of that. And along with that, our Facebook group.
That's exactly how it has felt to me. I mean, to me, it feels like a really safe place for a 200-hour yoga teacher to come in and ask any question you want. You know, that there's no stupid questions in your podcast, and it's you cover everything because all of those things need to be covered. So I think you've hit it on the nose, and some hear that story who came to it.
Yeah, one of the things that I've certainly noticed as well, just myself over time, is that, just like you said, community is such an important thing. It's such an important support for us as individuals, and I suppose even collectively. And one of the things that I really love, I'm a member of the Connected Yoga Teacher Facebook group. And one of the things that I love is that it is exactly that. There's so much really interesting and open conversation going on in there. And I think it feels like a space where people feel, I suppose, allowed to kind of ask and to explore whatever is going on for them. And given where we are, given where we're going in the world at the moment, I mean, we'll definitely want to dive a little bit deeper into that. But we're just, I don't even want to say coming through, but we are at some inflection point around this whole pandemic that's happening. Did you notice or have you noticed what's been happening in the group sort of around that subject? Or has there been any shifts
Yeah, there's been some big shifts in the group this year. 2020 was a year of, I can't remember when it was where the team was like, before COVID hit, this is well before, maybe around between 7,000 and 8,000 members, because we're just over 9 now. Oh. Around that spot, all of a sudden, there were more posts, so we're pretty fussy on some of the posts. You can't just say, come to my event, because if 9,000 people post about their yoga event worldwide, that's all you'd see on the wall. And we really want it to be about questions and discussions. And so we do share threads, and we do it that way, and we organize things, and we have our list of rules, of what you can and can't post. And then the team and I wanted to take a weekend off. And we're like, because we were all busy. Usually one of us can watch the group on the weekends, but we were all either in training or doing something, and we were having a lot of posts that we were going to have to delete. So I was like, well, I was so reluctant to do this, and I don't know why at this point. But the team was like, let's put it on that it has to be pre-approved posts. And not many people spoke out. Like, one person did say, why do all of my posts, feeling like it was just them? I was like, oh, I need to do an announcement in the group that it's everyone. So it just means that our team can kind of sift through. If somebody's trying to sell you sunglasses in there, we don't want them. We want them out. And so they sift through, and we mark off the rules. When COVID hit, it was like there was a huge spike in comments that weren't as supportive and helpful. So that's the one rule we always look at. Would this comment all by itself, if someone said that to you in person or online, would you think, oh, that was helpful and supportive, or not? And that's when we delete them. And some people will say, well, then you're kind of moderating our speech. And I say, well, it's like if I invited you to my house over for a party and you started being mean to my guests, I'd be like, I think you have to leave.
Yeah.
Or could we try saying this in a nicer way? There's lots of conversation before that. Yeah. That builds the vibe of the group.
Yeah.
And so when COVID hit, I think everyone's nervous system was in overdrive. So we saw a spike go up. But overall, the group holds that vibe. Once you set the stage, people will report posts or kind of they'll get vulnerable.
Yeah.
If someone's reactive, it's really an amazing group of people. And then today, this week, since Monday, with everything that we're dealing with Black Lives Matter, it feels like I just got worried this week as the moderator. Am I holding space? Like, I feel like I need to make sure I'm learning at a fast rate here. Not just holding space, but someone said this yesterday, hold brave space. So.
Yes, I saw that thing online that if you're posting, are you willing to put your body and your privilege and your livelihood at risk for it? And that's a really different thing to popping something up in solidarity, which we do so easily from our desks.
Yeah.
So that brave space is well put. And how has that felt for you? Have you taken action, or are you sitting back right now just to try to gauge what would be appropriate?
Well, I think for most of yesterday, I was wondering, have I shut down conversations that had to happen in the group? Because we're very strict about, you can't be telling people what to believe, what to eat, or how to vote. Like, those ones are really strong. No politics, like. But there are times when, like, yoga is so encompassing. Like, yoga is relationship. Yoga is how we treat each other in relationship. Like, there's the whole philosophy of yoga. So I guess I think, and I have, like, really, I feel like I have no idea in this on so many levels. But I know that I need to keep looking at my own, I have to do my own inner work to show up. And I really love what's happening this week in that we have this, I love how the shift is going towards, let's give Black people a voice this week. Let's close down our Instagram posts, our social media posts as white people, and give space. Respectfully give space for grieving and information. And at the same time, I have been upset this week that I feel like I should have known more in 2020. I feel like I should have known more.
Wow. Well, as a person of color, can I just thank you for that sentiment? It's really hard. Where we are is a really difficult place to be. And I also want to thank you for allowing me to post in the group something that was, a question about politics. It felt like it honestly, when I posted it, I was certainly mindful of all of the stuff that's going on in the States, but I was thinking more about the upcoming election in November, and also about the fact that that there's this group of yogis that are getting together that are trying to promote yogis to register to vote. And so I was thinking more about that, and that had got me thinking about the connection between yoga and politics. And how, even, whenever you want to talk about politics in any venue, it's a scary and sticky subject at the moment, because we're such a divisive country. We're such a divisive world at the moment. And so it's, everybody always goes, when you start edging towards politics, because it's a scary place to go when you don't want to fight with someone. But I thought it would be great to open up the conversation to talk about, how is your yoga supporting you, through this, or how is your yoga tied to your politics? And I appreciate you allowing that question to go through, because it opened up a whole conversation of people, just diving into that subject and sharing some really, really inspiring stuff about just the details of how they use their practice every day to kind of help them integrate what's happening and integrate how they feel and manage the stress.
Because what it's making me think of, I know, Shannon, you interviewed Jivana Heyman, who's the accessible yoga guy and is just doing fantastic work. And I went to his training in New York in October. And I honestly went there, oblivious of, as usual, thinking we're working on, making modifications. And I've included mental health and I've included, but whoa, did I get an education about how yoga is yoga's political, and it was about gender, and it was about race, and it was about white privilege, and that was wonderfully, deeply uncomfortable for someone who, has come out of white privilege and maybe does shy away from that. Let's not get divisive. Let's keep yoga as a universal, but our bodies aren't universal. A black body and a white body a black body is a much more vulnerable place to be in the United States and in Australia and in Canada with your Indigenous people are also. So it opened the conversation, and I don't think it's ever going to be pretty. Like, I actually think, as you said, you have to do your inner work, and I think it should be uncomfortable and that we should lean into the discomfort. The other thing I found interesting, and then you guys are probably thinking of stuff to say, was there was some asking at training for guidance from some of the people of color or people of other pronouns and things for education about it. And one wonderful woman said, if you can make a swan out of a napkin and look it up on Google, you can learn how to do this yourself. It was just like, I am not teaching. This is not my responsibility. This is your responsibility to go find this stuff and work it out for yourselves. I don't know. I'm not sure of that long conversation in any different direction, but
well, I've got a question. Yes, based on that. First, I have to say something, and then I have a question. So, I think there's a couple of different schools of thought around that, because yes, there are the people who are going to say, "Look, it's not my responsibility to educate you," but personally, and I'd like to think that I'm speaking for at least some segment of the population of people of color, I feel. I want to support people who are asking for help and understanding how to deal with this, how to manage this. The people like you, Shannon, who are sort of saying, look, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm doing my best to try to learn as much as I can. It's going to be awkward. I'm going to make mistakes, but I really am wanting to sincerely engage in this process and try to learn. And my question for you is, we've opened a can of worms. Like, what the group itself wasn't. I mean, I don't know if you had any thoughts about the kinds of things specifically that would be shared there. But what happens now? Like, how are you feeling about having this conversation and having this conversation grow within the group?
Oh, I'm all for this conversation in the group right now. Does it still make me uncomfortable? 100%. I'm not the person also to I can call experts in, but I definitely am not the person to lead the conversation. Even if yesterday I took a 2-hour emergency workshop for white entrepreneurs, which was really well done, really well done. It was Trudy LeBron who hosted it. Yeah.
Great.
So huge shout out to her. And
can you share some of the key bits that you learned in that? Like, can you share some of the stuff that you thought was really fabulous?
Yes, because I took furious notes, so they're in front of me here. One thing was, don't be defensive, just do better. And that, in everything, I have seen the defensiveness come up in me in the group. If someone goes to post in the group and then I'm defending why the rules of the group are there. Right now, it is my job to do better. It's my job to really listen and then ask, how can I do better? And I sent an email out today that was exactly that. I want to do better. And then it was like, please tell me how to do better. There were some amazing emails. I am talking a content strategy was one of the emails.
Wow.
This beautiful, I'm happy to send it over to you if I can get permission from that person who sent it to me. Just this, like, I've been listening to the podcast for a while. I'm glad to see you're at this place today and hear the ways that you can improve. And one thing of that has been so hard for me, and I've been asking my team and my colleagues for a while, is how do I get a more diverse group on my podcast? So that's a huge question, like, obviously. And I asked my one person of color on my team, how do I do that? And she's like, you need to start, broadening your circle as a white person. Like, I live in a white community up here in Canada, and I go to trainings with many white yoga people. So that's some of the work I have to do. Another one is that I'm looking at the entire topic of spiritual bypassing for the yoga world. And when I say I'm looking at where I'm doing it. My friend Mado told me something today that really helped as well.
I know Mado Hessling.
Yeah. Mado's great. She did a great live yesterday to talk about how yoga is anti-racism. It was fascinating.
Ooh, really?
Because she started to have because there was a challenge to that in her group, and she addressed it very well.
Oh, wow. I'm in her group. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that.
She talked about how she heard from someone, and I can't give any credit here, that we're all some type of percentage of racist, everyone. And if we looked at it in percentages.
Yep. I'm nodding my head furiously about this. I totally agree with that.
What were some of the other things? Sorry.
Insidious is the institutional racism that we don't see. It's the water that as fish we swim in.
Yeah.
That's because, of course, you're not, not of course, there are actively racist people, but for many of us, we feel like, oh no, we would never, and we would be inclusive. But what we're not seeing is our own white privilege. It's that blindness to the platform, which you were saying you were handing over. We don't even see it. So being quiet and stepping back is exactly the move to flip ourselves out of our tanks and onto the floor and feel what it's like to breathe some air instead of water and go, hey, it's uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the thing when you were saying, like, you are super comfortable sharing and you want to show up and help people who feel like they're at that spot. What I have heard over the past week and for a very long time is that some people are just feeling like, you go figure this out. Like, I am so busy fighting every single day, and I cannot carry this sea of ignorant people, really. And I feel like, okay, our mastermind today decided we're going to dig into some books together. Like, we will do a study group of a book club together. And the other thing that's really on my mind today is I was listening to a podcast. I want to call out the podcast. It'll come to me.
Okay.
Shanta Grant. That's who it was. Shanta.
Oh, that sounds familiar. It does sound familiar.
She's a great podcast, and I feel like I'm butchering her name. Anyway, she said, this is the hashtag this week, but then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I mean.
Yep.
So.
Shanta Grant, that's it.
Shanta, yeah.
Yeah, she's great.
Wow, yeah.
Here's the other thing I want to ask you. I want to flip the question now, because here's one of my questions. I've been following her for a long time, and we've been in the DMs back and forth. She shared that podcast today, and I reached out to her just like I would any other time, saying, hey, I would love to have you on the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. And then I had this moment of thinking, she's going to think it's because she's a person of color. Like, I've wanted to have her on the podcast, but then I felt like I needed to explain. And I've had someone else come on the podcast. We did the whole interview. I had reached out to her for, because she had written an amazing article. And at the end, after we stopped recording, she said, thank you so much for giving me a voice as a person of color. And I was like, I just want to let you know I'm not checking some box like on my diversity. And I want to interview more people of color, and I want them to know it's because I've done my research and I've found them do you know what I'm saying? So I don't know how to ask the question.
I do know what you're saying. I definitely know what you're saying. And I think, obviously I cannot speak for all people of color, but I think when it gets to the point where you've interviewed enough people of color, and I don't know how many people that is, but you've interviewed enough people of color that it doesn't feel, for each individual new person, it doesn't feel like they're the token, like, oh, I'm the, she's got, and this is a challenge. And then this is a whole nother conversation we can have. And because, the yoga world is what the yoga world is, and the world in general is what the world in general is. And so if your focus is really just on finding perhaps experts or people who are creating interesting work, whose work is being seen or shown in the world enough that you can find it, there's a very good chance that that those numbers are going to reflect, the same percentages that we're seeing in terms of people being a minority versus majority. So there's just going to be fewer people of color out there. But I think, it's sort of an answer to your question, I think we were talking before about, what was it? Now I've totally forgotten, but basically what I'm saying is the more people of color that you engage with, and not necessarily in your own circles. I know it's a challenge, to go out and try to find Black friends or whatever where you live, but we have access to so many voices and so many people around the world. So the more people that you engage with and that you hear from and that you look into and that you feature and talk with, the more, for lack of a better term, normal it will become. And the less that, each individual person of color will be thinking, oh, right, I'm just the token this month, or I'm just the token this year, or whatever it is. So it does take a little bit of work, and it's more work, as I said, for those same reasons as, the fact that there's not that many people out there. So you've got to, you got to work a little harder perhaps to find them.
Yeah.
I think it's so important that you're getting someone there. You're interested in delving into their work, but it's because of their work.
Yeah.
They
exactly.
Color. So I loved what you said, that your mastermind is going to delve in and actually make the work to look into this. Because if we don't look, we won't find it.
Exactly.
You're not going to get someone on just because they're Black. You're going to get someone on because they've done great work.
Yeah.
And they're Black. And so, it's that's expanding that diversity and giving platform and voice. But you're not going to put someone on who hasn't done work. It's not a tokenism that way. It's expanding the platform and you doing the work to expose yourself to more than what just falls at your doorstep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. And that's what, this is what, I know this week is, I hesitate before I even say I love this, but what I love is that everyone's follow these people. I feel like it's really laid out very well. If you go on social media right now in this week, you will find the people to follow, who are speaking out and to really being open to listen. That's a big piece of it.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that we need situations like this for that to kind of bubble up and for these names to kind of, to show up. But I don't know. I mean, I think if we're moving towards a society that is more, that is more fair, that is more unbiased, then we do have to be kind of willing to hear and process and integrate all of these different voices and to seek them out. And I'm actually even sitting here thinking, right, what can you do? What can I do as a person of color? And I think, I'm a member of other groups on Facebook that are specifically for Black yoga teacher groups. And I think, gosh, you could share, if there's somebody in there that you think is fabulous and doing amazing work, you could share their work just to ensure that other people hear and see that. And I think we probably all, have someone or in the course of our whatever we do, have come across somebody or will come across folks whose work we can share, knowing that it might not otherwise get shared, or might not otherwise get out there.
Yeah, there is 2 times this week, like one is a Facebook Live and then one is an event happening online. Obviously nothing in person right now here in Canada, but those 2 things, one thing that was brought up yesterday is we can give our spot up to a person of color, which I really feel like that's a powerful thing that we can do right now, especially if there's an event and there are no people of color. So this is one thing that I realized a while ago. I was part of an online summit and and afterwards it got called out for having not enough diversity. And I realized that this is happening a lot in the yoga world, and it's up to us, all of us collectively. Now I will ask questions, right? So as soon as I get asked to speak at something, that's one of the leading questions. Are there people of color going to be there?
I so appreciate that.
So do
I really do. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen summit after, online event after, in-person event. And I've just gone, there's no one that looks like me in this group. No one.
Yes. And I have to tell you, from the other side, I got really defensive. I was like, well, how was I to know who was there? Or like, and that's that, don't get defensive, just do better. So if I given the information, I would have asked, do you have people of color there?
Yeah.
And that's such a chance for that dialogue, because then the organizer is like, oh,
I didn't even think about it.
So I asked for another conference that's coming up, and they're talking about diversity. It's Allison Russell that's hosting that.
Yeah.
And this week I'm going to I'm going to call her and say, would you prefer a person of color to speak instead of me? Even though I know she has a diverse group, but in what we're in right now, I just think it's responsible for me to ask that.
Yeah, for sure. So we've opened up. No, go ahead, Maria. Were you going to say something, Maria?
No, I just think we all just took a big sigh. And
I know. I
think pausing, because it's been a week where you're feeling a lot and trying to process a lot, and I there's tremendous grief and horror at so many things. Really, it's just been the weirdest year. But this is just it's all led up to having this explosion of emotion, and it's got to be good. Like, it's doing better, and if it's going to be a catalyst for things, it's got to be a catalyst for action. I could see that pause in us as we all just want to take.
I know. I have a question. Like, I would be interested in your thoughts, Shannon, and maybe even both of y'all, about what do you think the role of the yoga community is in helping to bridge the gap, mend wounds, whatever it is?
That's such a good question. I mean, what is the role of the yoga community right now? I don't know that I have the answer. I have a question.
Yeah. Like,
what is the balance of doing the inner work? Because it's not enough if I said, I'm going to go sit on a mountain and meditate. Bye. Like, that's a lot easier. Like, I raised 3 kids as a single parent. Like, that mountain seemed very like the easy path. But being in relationship,
compared to
being in relationship and struggling, like doing the wrong thing over and over again as a human.
Yeah.
But then taking action. So the biggest thing this week is like, I was like, take action, but it's going to be wrong so often.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do we balance that inner work? Because if we say, well, my job is to host a yoga class where everyone can show up and do their inner work, I think that's amazing. And then where, like you talked about Jivana, he will say he's an activist. And there's got to be a good way to do this that is effective, that doesn't feel like you're forcing everyone to do something. Like, I don't know. I don't have any answer.
No, it's a hard question. It really is. And I suppose more than anything, it's about giving us all something to think about. You know, I'm keen to hear what Mado has to say about yoga and racism, but I feel really strongly that our ability to embrace that we are all one, like that we are all, you know, my pain is your pain, is their pain, is whatever. And that to me is like the underlying message of yoga. Our ability to truly believe that, to truly feel that. And that comes from, you know, dealing with all the things that you talked about, 3 kids and paying the bills and whatever, and working through all those layers of life, being able to kind of process through all those layers of life and know that you're kind of more than just the anger you feel or the aggravation you feel or the frustration you feel. I don't know. When you say it out loud, it sounds like something so small. But
yoga, part of it is, I mean, part of our job is to bring people in touch with who they are really, with their genuine self. And if you go into, before someone has those resources to actually feel, so maybe our speechlessness is quite appropriate because we are feeling it. Unless you feel safe enough to come into a space and develop that sense of embodiment or empathy or the ability to kind of use your mind and body together to feel, then you are just one of those hard people who is afraid and hard and closed. So those are really dangerous people. But then once, and I like the way Jivana does it, is he kind of will invite you in and he will be very inclusive and get you very safe. But then he's not afraid once you're safe to go, okay, you're there. Now I've got an uncomfortable question for you. Mm-hmm. You know, and then you go, ooh, but you can safely sense the discomfort. And that's where you should do the work. And I you know, not everyone in our society clearly has these resources. I think we're very under-resourced in just feeling something. Mm-hmm. And then bypassing this sort of, you know, the crap that goes on in yoga classes that is just such bull, that isn't that deep sense of I am so bowled over and speechless and having a stomachache because of the pain of this week. That's the first step. And then the next step is, okay, now I can lean into this discomfort and not completely fall apart myself or close back up like a clamshell.
Mm. I think it feels like we're all struggling to figure out what we can do right now. Mm-hmm. And we're judging ourselves for going about our normal routine or what we had planned for this week or this life or whatever it is. And we're thinking, is that still appropriate? And in fact, we were talking about that before we started recording, because originally we made this appointment with Shannon. We were going to talk all about pelvic health, pelvic floor health, and, you know, and all that. She's got this upcoming course, and we were excited to talk all about that stuff. And then we kind of realized, wait a minute, maybe we should kind of open this conversation up a little bit. But, you know, I like to think, especially for many of those people, and we've talked about a lot of great things that people can do in terms of educating themselves. But I would like to think that offering your yoga class, offering a space for somebody to relax or to, you know, feel embodied or whatever it is, you know, you might think, oh, maybe I should cancel that or maybe I should whatever. I personally think we have to keep that up. I think we have to keep that going. These like
yoga
spaces,
classes,
all of it, you know, all of the stuff that we're doing. I think we have to perhaps shift our thinking around it. But I think that really what we're all doing is trying to offer space for healing. And it looks a lot of different ways. But I think that if we just say, no, I'm not going to do this because it's not, people wouldn't judge this as something that's appropriate or that is, you know, specifically addressing injustice. I don't actually think that that's the right way to do it. This is my own personal opinion. I think we have to continue to offer space for people to explore and to to feel themselves and to discover themselves and to open themselves up to each other.
I don't know if we mentioned it in the time we've been recording, but you've made a decision to not promote your course this week, haven't you? You've pulled back from that.
Yeah. So today was supposed to be the launch. I did send out an email because it was in a podcast, like it will be June the 1st, June the 1st. All of this was happening. So I sent out an email saying, like, explaining why. And then at the bottom was like, P.S., like, I still want to hold to my promise. The doors are open to pelvic health professionals. You can still join. I will not be posting on social and sending you a pile of emails this week. And you know what? My mastermind asked me today, well, how's your launch going? You know what? It's going really well anyway.
Oh, good.
And that's because I've done the work of talking about things before.
Yeah.
And it just would feel so wrong to show up and be like, this is. So I think this is another question, not an answer that I have, but I think that our teachers who are holding space in their small communities, and they're like, I should be out there, protesting, but maybe for whatever reason they can't be doing that. Or maybe, like, I live 3 hours away from a protest and I'm not supposed to drive that far. Maybe then the small community spaces that we are creating, is that what you're saying, is like we are still doing the work?
Yeah.
But I think it's important that we are able to stand up and say, these are my values.
Yes.
I am now, like, standing with this anti-racist movement. I am an ally.
Absolutely. And thank you for that kind of clarification, because really what I mean is that we have to continue doing what we're doing, but we have to shift the way that we're thinking about it. And we have to shift perhaps even the way that we're kind of engaging about it. Like, I think somebody said, oh, this is the hashtag this week, and then, next week or whatever. We really kind of have to let go of that. And we have to try to integrate, like, what all of this really means. Like, the time has come, really. This isn't just an episode of some ridiculous reality TV show. Like, this is affecting everyone's lives. It's affecting your life, whether you feel it or not. And so I think we're all being called to think about this, to bring it into our hearts, our minds, feel it in whatever way that we feel it, and have it impact how we are in the world, how we are with ourselves, how we are with other people. Because I think that's the only way that things will change.
Yes. Because I think you're right, that we have the capacity to look at ourselves and say, how could I do better as an individual? 100%. And that's where I think that's what yoga has gently nudged me to do my entire life. Like, oh, isn't that interesting? Like, oh, that wasn't very graceful, that moment. Yeah. I know a lot of people are afraid to show up right now because they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. Yeah. And that's how I was yesterday. It took me it felt like it took me 2 hours to make a post in the Connected Yoga Teacher group. And I asked people, please, like, call me out. And I think if we could not take it as personal, like this, like, I'll just do better. You teach me what I've done wrong. Not like, here, I want to take your time up.
Yeah.
But if you see something, I mean, that's also what good friends do. Hey, that was not cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're in this kind of crazy place in the world now where people are so afraid of saying anything. They're so afraid of making a wrong step. And I get it, because people can be a little vicious. There's this whole, like, cancel culture and all this kind of craziness. And my belief is that is so counter to what we really should be doing. It really is. If no one is willing to, step a toe outside of their comfort zone, then we'll never get to a place where we can start to even understand each other. So again, I do really appreciate it. And I hear you, like, that, oh my goodness, I had to, do a lot of real thinking and asking and whatever about putting stuff out there. But, personally, I would ask any people of color out there who are listening to this, can you please be compassionate? I mean, I know it's hard, and we often think, you know, who knows? People might, I might get done for this, but I mean, I just feel like, look, everybody says, I do feel like we're kind of in this all together in some ways, you know? And so, you know, yes, it's easy to see situations where someone's saying, look, it's your responsibility to, you know, to help me. But it's also really easy to see when people are sincerely just trying to get it right. And so if we can just be open to that and to be compassionate, that's definitely yoga.
I think I love that Shannon took 2 hours to create a post.
I know. I love that.
I think it's the hard work, though, Shannon. It's not the spiritual bypass, and it is not what is so dangerous and equally powerful, but dangerous about social media is in less than 10 seconds, you can share a post. You have no skin in the game, no blood in the game, no, you haven't relinquished anything. You've just gone, yeah, I feel that, you know. I mean, you literally like, share, That is so different to saying, wait a second, what am I feeling? How can I do better? That is the work of yoga. And when you talked about spiritual bypassing, I just love it because it's so easy for people to just do that fake work of yoga. And the real work, it's supposed to be uncomfortable. And there is the discomfort that you go, oh, this is interesting. How can I be both wise and compassionate and skillful? And so I wish more people were taking 2 hours to create a post. Because if somebody criticizes it, you actually can say, well, I spent all morning on it and I actually did the best I can and I'm willing to improve, but I didn't just quick shoot it off because I'm so privileged whatever I say as a white person is fine.
Yeah, I appreciate that you like that it took me 2 hours. And I feel like that training with Trudy LeBron like gave me a lot of information. She has a podcast. I would highly recommend that. I don't know if you can get her on your podcast. I sure reached out right away to ask her on mine. I'm sure she's very busy right now.
Yeah, bet. I'll write her name down though.
Yeah, because she showed this image in the training, and it was an image of, it looked like, for me, it looked like 3 children standing trying to see a baseball game, and the fence went up like kind of on a slope, but the ground went down. So these 3 children were sitting on 3 boxes, but only one of them could see the baseball game. And she was like, just take that in for a moment. And then it showed the person on the lowest slope of land with the highest piece of fence had 3 blocks. The next person had 2 and the next person had 1. And that showed all 3 people could now see the baseball game. And that was the difference between equity versus equality. Like, we can say we're all equal, but guess what? We're not all showing up equal here. And then the third picture was justice, and that was where everybody was tearing the fence down. So it was really powerful. Like visuals like that, and I'm a visual learner, then that made a big difference of.
It's important maybe to note that all of us are sitting, 2 of us in Australia and 1 of us in Canada. And they are countries through their health system that value equity.
Yes.
We value equality, but we value equity. We are not willing to step over dead people on our way into the hospital. You know, there is that safety system. And both Chara and I grew up in the United States. Equality and the equal crack at things is what's valued. And I think that's coming unstuck right now. So that visual image is so important, because I think it's very easy when you're in a position of privilege to think that everyone has an equal chance to see over the fence. And you don't.
Yes, that's exactly it. And this week I was like, why didn't I see this? And I realized this has got to be so frustrating to Black people. Like, that's where I was upset with myself. Like, yes, I saw this, and there were pieces of it that I didn't. And I do think this, like, I have to sign up that this is an ongoing process where I have to add this in as, like, you know, as important as it is for me to make yoga accessible to all bodies, this is another thing. I need to make yoga accessible, and my message and my group, that brave space. And I cannot, it's like I couldn't see it, but how are we, I don't know. I guess that's the thing. I do get a little bit frustrated with myself when there's something like, I feel like, why couldn't you see that in the same way that you see it today? Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I feel like yoga has taught me that lesson. There are things that I learned, quote unquote, you know, a decade ago. And I was just like, I don't get this. We've been talking about this, haven't we? We were talking about the Yoga Sutras. And I was like, I don't, it's not sinking in. But as my personal experience has changed, as, you know, as me as an individual has changed, and my capacity for understanding things has shifted, and that's only through time and experience. That's it. Like, I probably still have the same IQ as I did 10 years ago. Our capacity for understanding and processing things changes. And then one day, all of a sudden, something appears and we're like, what? That was always there? Hold on. Right. I couldn't see that before. We just have to be grateful that we can now, you know, and we have to understand that this is just part of the process. So for so many people, I'm so glad you brought this up, Shannon. For so many people who just even now are like, I don't know, I'm still not so sure. Just be willing to be with it, because a time will come, if you're willing to be with it, if you're not pushing it away, a time will come where you'll see, you will understand. Somebody will present something in a picture or a story or something that resonates, and you'll go, oh boy, I see this now.
And I have no place to speak on this, but the upsetting thing is then it's taking lives from COVID, lives from injustice to make that visible. That I can't imagine what it's like on the other side of that, to be like, see this, you all don't see this. Yeah. And now I feel like more responsibility, and this is where the part comes in of what can I do? Like, I want to make a bigger difference. I don't know what that is.
I have a question, because I love to identify yourself in your podcast as a mother of 3 children and a yoga teacher. I just think that I think that that really, it places you. How, and we all have children, and I think, how are you talking to your children about this? Are you talking to your children about this? And what are they, because that's the next generation, isn't it? That's
right.
Yeah.
I started to have like mom guilt, 'cause this post came up of all the books that you should have read to your kids. And I was like, I didn't know. I'm sure. My daughter she's 15, so she's here. The boys are away working right now. And they're not living in our bubble, so they come to visit us in the yard, but they don't come in the house, and they don't live here anyway. They're older. My 2 sons, I call them boys. They're young men. Sage, my daughter, has been in a place where she's watching Instagram. And I said to her today, I know it's getting heavy. Like, I could see it on her face. And we had this discussion about how hard it is to post when you know that people are going to judge you for what you post. And she said she couldn't sit by and watch what other people were posting any longer. And there are she has hard questions. And so I question my parenting, and then I really want to be having the discussions. That's all I can do.
Yeah.
Not perfectly, just fumbly.
Chara, have you been talking to your kids?
Yeah, a lot about it. Mine are 16. I have 16-year-old twins. And we've been talking about it a lot. And just because it's there, and for the exact same thing, they're seeing things and they're kind of forming their opinions and their independent opinions and beliefs around it. So from our point of view, even though I'm sure it's clear to them how we feel, my husband and I, how we feel about what's going on, we're more just talking about looking at what's going on. Just what is actually happening here, as opposed to trying to be in one camp or the other. It's more because I want them to understand this is complex. What you are seeing here is history. It's the current situation, it's pandemic, there's so much more going on here than just people, lighting things on fire and breaking windows and being in pain. There's a lot behind this, and life is complex. And so we just have to, feel what we're feeling, be willing to feel what we're feeling. And what can we learn about ourselves from it? What stuff stirs something in us? And what aspect of what we're seeing is that stuff? Is it the injustice? Is it I haven't been able to watch any of the videos of I can't watch any of that.
I won't either.
But, what is that? Because I think the parts that are stirring us is our connection to other people. When we're seeing some, like that bit of humanity. And so, what can you do? We have we should know as parents, we don't have any answers. We're just trying to get through this. So I think all we can really do is just, support, be there for them and listen, and maybe even ask questions about how they're feeling and whatever, but not necessarily try to make it all okay. Because I don't think we can.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm learning from my kids.
Yeah, I know, it's great.
They're good at this.
Yeah.
They're just the way that they negotiate it and the way that they look at it is interesting. And my daughter works for an organization. It's Reconciliation Week in Australia. So it happens to be the week where we are talking about what it is to be an Indigenous Australian and creating consciousness about that. So it's interesting time. We've, similar problems. We have a lot of Black deaths in custody and a lot of brutality, and she's just been focusing on posting as much awareness of people who of color or Indigenous Australians who've been writing books and things like that, and posting that in her work and stuff. So it's been interesting to see that response rather than necessarily her own messages, just getting as much out there as possible.
I really like that. I have a question for both of you, because this is what started you reached out to me on Facebook and asked me, can I post this political question? And I was like, this is important. And here's the thing in our household, this just got me thinking about the kids. I love to talk politics. Now, I really try and keep it off the podcast and out of the group, but I come from a very fiery family that talks about politics a lot. I was never taught, don't go talk about politics at a party.
Oh.
My family didn't say that. They probably could have instilled that in me. So my kids hear a lot about politics and they bring it all to the table, and we all kind of have not real arguments, but debates for sure.
Awesome.
And you had asked me, or you had shown me this list. I'd love if you describe what this is of how yoga and politics fits together. Does that? And I want to just say, I realize this is a different issue than what we've been talking about. We've been talking about a humanity issue, but it is interweaved.
It's political.
Definitely. I think it is. I do. So I originally, Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield and David Lipsius, who are, most people kind of have a sense of who they are in the yoga world, at least. There may be some yoga students who don't know who they are, and I'll cover that in the outro or intro or something. But they have put together a whole effort to get yogins out to register to vote in the U.S. election in November. They're all getting behind, and so they've collected signatures of about 108 yogis, auspicious number of yogis, to kind of promote this effort. And they've put together a whole website with information on voter registration, and all the rest of it. And they've also put together a letter that's basically appealing to, and I'll put a link to the letter in the show notes, that's appealing to the yogic community to, regardless of what side of the political fence that you sit on, to engage in this process, of, I don't want to say politics, but it's really more about it. It is like embracing your responsibility as a householder, and the yoga is the foundation of that. So the yoga is kind of this foundation from which you can, be the best version of a householder as possible. And so really they are just appealing. We are just appealing to, because a lot of yogis have different views about politics. Like you were kind of saying, Shannon, it's not something that you talk about on the podcast or various things. And a lot of people have views about politics, being in or out of yoga. But I think what they're appealing to, or what we're all appealing to, is to have yoga inform the way that you engage with politics, and to make it okay, just to make it okay for people to do that, to engage. And so, that's what this letter was really all about. And
I do hope that everyone does have a listen, because if we think about the values that most yoga teachers have, and we look at the philosophy of yoga, and we've studied that for a while, if we take ahimsa alone, those are the people I want voting.
Yes, exactly.
If we totally disagree and they vote for something that we don't agree with, as you said, at least they're engaging and having a voice. In Australia, voting is compulsory.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, it's compulsory.
You get fined if you don't vote. And I absolutely love that, because it's like, do not sit on your sofa telling everybody how crap you think things are. Get off your butt. Inform yourself. So you've got to put something down on that piece of paper. Now is your civic obligation to find out who on earth you're voting for and what are the issues and what is going on. Where it's again a bypass that a lot of people, they'll just moan and groan or let it wash over them, but they aren't engaging because they don't get off their butts to actually make a statement. They just opt out.
My dad always said to me, if you want to sit around this table and fight about politics, you better be voting.
Yeah,
exactly.
There you go.
And so I think the same thing, we can teach being political and being active without telling people how to vote. So nobody is saying you should do that. And it's the same. I think we teach yoga I hope in a secular way, if you're teaching, on larger platforms, and it should support everybody's spirituality regardless. But the principles underlying it are not of bypassing, not of just not engaging, but of doing the work.
Yes.
Engage this skillful engagement with what are the issues and what are my feelings about it and what can I find out and who can I talk to?
Yeah.
Right. See, this is one of the conversations that we have been avoiding in the group. Yeah. And I wonder if we're doing a disservice by doing that.
Well, I would say not partisan politics. So can we not talk about
who you're voting for?
Anyway, I'm hoping everyone, it's obvious who they're going to vote for in the United States. But anyway, no. But it doesn't need to be said. And is if you do engage people with ahimsa and with satya and with santosha and then and svadhyaya, it's like hopefully they're going to put the check in the right place on the voting card. But otherwise, at least they've done the work to get themselves there.
How much is the charge if you don't vote in Australia?
Ooh, good question.
I think it's like
I don't even know.
$100 and $200.
Yeah.
Ooh, like a good chunk of change.
It's a chunk of change. It can't obviously because it hits people who are underprivileged. Sometimes they just haven't been able to do that, or because they don't get mail or don't have an address.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
In state, I just looked at the first thing that came up on Google was Western Australia. You get charged $20 for your first time.
Oh.
Reoffender, you get $50, but that may just be in a state election. So there's also federal charges. So you have to vote even in council. Like you got to vote
everything.
You
All of them.
Up and put your name down.
I really like that. No, we don't have that here.
No? Oh, wow.
I'm always bugging my kids. Like if it's voting day and they're stopping in to visit, because they often will.
Yeah.
And there's big discussions leading up to it. Like who are you voting for? My kids will always ask me. That's the other thing. I like to be really open and honest with my kids. When I was growing up, my parents didn't want to talk about who they were voting for. Like it was a secret, which I understand. Like,
did they not want to influence you, or did they just?
I mean, I was
not want to have to defend themselves.
I think they didn't want to have to defend themselves.
Right.
I mean, I put a sign on my lawn, so it's pretty clear who I'm voting for.
Oh, well, ladies, this has turned into like a tea with friends moment. Shannon, firstly or lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for everything you do. You are holding, with that group, with your podcast, with everything you do, you are holding some real powerful and yes, brave space for us as teachers to do the work that we have to do and to think about what drives us to do it, and to get through those moments of fear and weakness that come from when we don't know how to put together a script, or whatever it is, or we don't know how to do the music, or some of those really simple things, but all the way to what our values are and how we can express those. And you're doing it in such a beautiful and open way, and embracing your own, I don't know, what you know and what you don't know about some of the sticky situations, but also just a willingness to have the uncomfortable conversations. And I think that is just setting such a wonderful example for the yoga community to follow. So thank you for doing all of that.
I agree. I think you have this morning brought your own vulnerability into it. And what you end up doing is creating a safe space for other people to bring their vulnerability to it too.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like you're going to clamp shut on anyone. It's like, no, let's create a safe space to do this work together.
Well, I really appreciate both of you having this chat today. Like I was really thinking, oh, it's so good. I'm so glad we have this call today. And then when we started talking, I was like, oh, I really don't think we should talk about pelvic health. That should not be like, it feels silly to talk about it. Even though it's very important.
It is very important.
Just right now, it isn't.
Too. We'll have to have that conversation one day.
Yes, for sure, actually. But yeah, so your course is still open. I don't want to super plug it, but I do just want to say that, and I'll throw some stuff into the outro about it for anybody who's interested, because yes, it is still important.
It's still important. But I did want to say, thank you both for having this conversation, and thank you also for acknowledging we all live in quite privileged countries.
Yep.
And I would invite anyone who is feeling like, hey, I have a message to add, or I have something, I want those voices to be heard. And I am in a good place where I can hear feedback as well.
Same.
The group, hey, do this. What about this? You didn't think about this thing? So
that's right. So you're offering an invitation from the three of us, really, for that help doing the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if someone else is like, okay, well, I found this resource super helpful, or this was uncomfortable. Those are the stories that I learned from anyway. So
same. Right. Well, we finished our teas, and I'm kidding. Until the next conversation. Thanks again, Shannon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so much juicy stuff in this chat. I'm still thinking about what we discussed, and I know that this conversation is really only just getting started. Since our talk, Shannon, being the powerhouse that she is, has already reached out to some wonderful and noteworthy women of color to share their wisdom with the connected yoga teacher community, and I'm really excited and looking forward to that. As well, Maria and I are also going to be jumping into the connected yoga teacher community in a couple of weeks to talk more about the yoga of politics. As I said, we've opened a can of worms. And so where are you in all of this? In some ways, I feel that this current situation is really asking us all what we believe. Where are we in our education about these issues? How willing are we to engage in this process, to learn and to do the hard work of change within ourselves and our homes and our communities? This time it feels like it's all about waking us up to ourselves, and nothing feels more yogic than that. We would love to hear from you. So what are your questions and what are your challenges? What is this time, the state of things, bringing up for you or showing you about yourself? If you feel moved, please drop us an email to share your thoughts and experiences. We would really love to hear from you. We mentioned in passing that Shannon's pelvic floor health course is open for enrollment. And so I just wanted to remind you to jump on over to her website. The details for that are in the show notes to check it out. And we've got a bunch more juicy conversations lined up to share with you in the coming weeks. We're really excited about some of the people we'll be talking with. And of course, we'll be talking with each other. So please stay tuned, take care of yourself, and thank you so, so very much for listening. Namaste.
Well, connected yoga teachers, I am so curious to hear from you. If you feel led to share your thoughts on today's episode, you can head over to theconnectedyogateacher.com/173 and you can leave your comments at the bottom of the show notes page. Thank you again, Maria and Chara, for having me on the podcast, for really acknowledging my reluctance to even share. At first, I said, I don't think it's a good time to promote at all. Let's not promote. And once I got talking about that, then they wanted to know why it was that I wasn't promoting pelvic health professionals. And then once we started getting into that conversation, they requested, can we have this conversation and record it for the podcast? And they were so sweet to let me listen to the audio to see if I was comfortable with it afterwards. And they just made me feel like it was a really safe space. Because the last thing I wanted to be doing was putting my voice out there at a time where we really need to be listening to Black voices or the voices of people who have been working for years with everything regarding antiracism. If you're on my email list, Connected Yoga Teachers, you would have gotten an email from me saying, I want to do better. I think we all can step forward and do better in different ways. And I am so open to hearing your thoughts about the podcast. I also want to share one more thing. The week that this podcast was created, I remember feeling like there's so much work to do, like feeling like I just had to keep going like at this incredible pace. And maybe it took 5 or 6 days to realize this needs to be marathon work. This needs to be work that I continue to do. I continue to show up and ask, how can I do better? Alrighty, it's time for me to sign off. But before I do, I want to say a huge thank you to our team over here at the Connected Yoga Teacher, Suzanne, Crunch, Nick, and Sinead. Thank you so much for all of the work that you continue to do in this world, especially with the podcast and our Facebook group. Last week, we actually got to hear from the entire team. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and have a listen to it. I learned something new about each and every team member. Also, thank you, dear listener. I know that you are out there doing important work. You're doing important work on self and also out in your community. You are showing up and you are serving when you can. This work doesn't always get the recognition that it deserves. And sometimes we're giving so much that we forget to give back to ourselves. So I really would love to know what you will be doing this week to stay connected. Maybe that's to yourself, your yoga practice, or your community. And this is so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.